Okay, we are, whoops, not yet. Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. Today's API cooking class, we are going to cover checking and setting opt-in statuses using the API. And as usual, what I'm going to do uh, is in order to get a clean recording, I'm going to ask you to hold your questions to the end. And at that time, I'll be more than happy to take any questions you have on either opt-in or any other API question that you would like to ask at that time. So diving right in, today's topic, again, checking opt-in statuses and setting those statuses. This, I initially had this in the intermediate section of the cookbook, and um, I actually think this is still more of a beginner recipe. It's actually quite easy to do. And so let's pull up some code and we'll go through it. So what I've been doing the last several weeks is I have been um, doing what I call a simple version. The simple version just shows you the calls necessary to get the job done. That's it. And then I have a second version which shows you a use case, and so that has a little bit more code around it, so you can kind of see how this might be used. So this is our simple version. Format is should be familiar to everybody. The things that you are going to, I always start out with sort of a boilerplate. I echo hello world just so that we know that the script is working. These are the pieces that you need to connect to Infusionsoft. I am not going to go through those. Those are outlined in the missing guide to setting up the Infusionsoft API. However, the things that you could potentially need to change is this line only if the Infusionsoft SDK is not in the same directory as your script is. So, for example, you can see I always make a folder called scripts. Here is my ISDK file, and here are my scripts. So they are in the same folder, which is why there is no path here. If you were to put these in a different folder, which does happen, then you would need to complete this path. So that's one thing that you might need to change. Second thing that you will need to change is, oops, I'm on the wrong one, is here, which is the name of the connection that you gave in the con.config file. I am using an account, my sandbox account, and therefore I named it sandbox in my con.config file. Whatever you named yours will need to go here. And again, more details on that if you need to refer to it in the setup guide, the missing guide to setting up the Infusionsoft API. The other last point I always make about this is this variable here, where you instantiate a new connection, a new ISDK and a new connection, notice they are the same. You can name this variable anything that you like. You don't have to call it app, which is what I call it. I do that because that is the way it is done in the Infusionsoft documentation, and that just makes it easier for so you can cut and paste. You can call it anything that you like, my app, API, whatever. The only caveat is that whatever you call it, anytime you make a call to the API, like we've done down here, um, it always has to be the same. Whatever is up here has to be in each call, otherwise you will get an error. So that is it for connecting to Infusionsoft. My boilerplate always has the current date in it, which I echo back, and that way as I'm troubleshooting, I can see the time that things are, you know, that if nothing changes, at least the time changes. And then we have just some dummy data here for purposes of opt-in, which is what we're doing today. The only thing that we really need is an email address. So we're going to work, to begin with, we are going to work with, actually, I think we'll make a new email address here. Let's just see here. We'll just make JFK at whitehouse.gov. That's something I know is not in my database. Well, spell it right would be helpful. JFK at whitehouse.gov. So this is going to be when we start, initially, this is going to be a new contact, okay, in our database. And let me go ahead and get Infusionsoft. 1 second here, you guys. Well, let me get my Infusionsoft sandbox. I probably should have done that previously, and I did not. Bear with me. All right, so let's see here. And you can't see this, I know that, because I am over on another screen. Hang on, I will bring it over in a minute. Okay. All right, so this is our sandbox account here. And if we go to contacts, we'll be able to look at what we're working with here. Okay, so great. All right. So we're going to work with, to begin with, we're just going to use this email address because that's the primary thing that opt-ins refer to, actually. So this is not really that relevant to begin with. And then, so our how-to begins here. So the first thing that we're going to look at is we're going to say, how do we check the opt-in status of a contact? Well, the call is this right here. Very simple. It is opt status, and it only has a single argument or parameter that goes with it, and that is an email address. So again, we're going to use JFK at whitehouse.gov, although actually now I know why I had Kim Snyder here, because let me get back to that. Give me just a second, because that's already in the database, which if you're going to check a status, it's obviously got to already be there. So to begin with, we're just going to check the status of Kim at kimsnyder.com and make sure everything else is okay. And so when I run this, let me add a preview screen over here. Okay, so you can see what happened here. Actually, let me save this. There we go. So the status that is returned is 2. And I've got some notes down here. If I redo this like this and save again, what you're going to see is it's going to put it out here. So status 2, it means double opt-in. 1 means that they are opted in, and 0 means that they are opted out. So if I go over here and I look at Kim at kimsnyder.com, and I click into that record, and I say, now that's interesting, because I believe that this says that it, confirmed. Okay, so confirmed is a double opt-in. Okay, so that is why it is 2. So that is correct. So you've got to know that it's not going to come back and give you the verbiage. It's going to give you these codes 210. All right. So this is all it takes to check the status of an opt-in. Now, let me just show you where you would find that. If you wanted to look at that, in the documentation. If I go to help.infusionsoft.com API docs, and it's going to, this is the what is soon will become known as the old developer documentation. There is a new, you know what, let's just do that. Let's just go to the new one, because that way this will be, this is still in beta, but this will be a little more evergreen if we do it this way. Developer.infusionsoft.com. And if we go to the documentation, API services, you will see that we have a service called email service. And here in the email service, we have get opt-in status, get opt status, opt-in, and opt-out. So the one that we are starting with is this one, get opt status. And basically I just copied and pasted this right out of the documentation. Okay, so we now know how to check a status, right? So the next thing that we are going to do is we are going to opt in a contact. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to uncomment these two lines right here, and the next thing, and these two right here, because so what we're doing here is we're saying, all right, so for this, now I'm going to change it, okay? Let's see. I need someone who is not opted in. So let's do this. Let's run a report here on reports, and let's go to email status search, and let's see someone who is unconfirmed. Perfect. So no, that means they're not opted in at all. So here's what we'll do. We'll just add a new contact. Yeah, we could do it this way. Come on, get out of the way. Contact, add contact. I have no idea who, so we'll just say Abraham, Lincoln, and we'll make Abe at whitehouse.gov. Now I'm going to leave this, I'm not going to check this box, okay? That's what we want. So Abe at whitehouse.gov is not opted in, but he is not opted out. And that is important for reasons that you will see in a minute, okay? So what we're going to do is we'll use old Abe here, okay? So if, let's just, let's go back here. Oops. Let's just run the status, okay? So that we can see what that looks like with Abe. Okay, so notice that his status here, make this bigger, is 0, meaning he is opted out. Now, it may or may not let us opt him in, we'll see. But because he hasn't been opted out, I'm hoping that it will. So let's see here. We are gonna take these out. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to opt him in here using this call, opt in. This call has two parameters. One is the email address, but the other is the reason or the explanation of why you believe this person is marketable. Okay. And then I've got the same echo line to just kind of tell us, interpret the results. And then, so once we've hopefully opted him in, we'll see, then we're going to try a status again. So we're going to start with 0. We're going to try to opt him in, which we did, and then notice that the status changed to 1. Okay, so he started out as 0, then we opted him in. Now, we assigned the result to a variable, again called result, and echoed that back. And notice that this time the result is 1, but what that means is success. So that means we successfully opted him in. Had it not been successful, for example, he was already opted in, would be an example, or he has been opted out previously, then this would come back blank, which means fail. It did not opt him in if you saw a blank here. And then we check his status again, and you can see that it has been changed to 1, which is opted in. Okay, so that is how we opt someone in. Now, let's opt him out. Okay. I've got this note here that says once you opt out a contact, you can't opt them back in with an API. If they opt out, by hitting the opt out on your email, for example, or you opt them out via API or in the admin area of Infusionsoft, doesn't really matter how they got opted out, but once someone takes an action to opt someone out, you cannot opt them back in with the API. You've got to go do it manually. And so that's going to be important when we get to our use case. So what we will do here is I'm going to I'm going to comment this out, and I'm going to open this back up. So what we will do, same thing we did above, only instead of opting in, this time we're going to opt out. Okay, so here is our opt out. Again, it's almost identical to the call for opt in. The only difference is it says opt out instead of opt in. You still need email as an argument, and you still need some sort of a explanation of why you're opting them out, or who requested to be opted out, etc. So we're going to start by looking at their status currently, which should be a 1, and then opting them out, and then checking the status after we've opted them out. So it should change to a 0, right? So we'll hit save, and there we go. So it started out as 1, being opted in. Success, meaning we successfully opted them out. And then when we check the status is now 0 for opted out. And now we actually really can't work with Abe anymore because I cannot opt him back in. At least not by API. I've got to go in and do it manually. Okay, so this is our simple example of just the calls that are required to get someone opted in, opted out, and then also to check their opt-in status. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to switch from this simple version. Okay, by the way, I just hit save again, and just as sort of out of interest, because there are 0, notice that this came in as blank. And that's because fail. You can't opt them in or opt them out, either one, because they've opted out. So you can't opt out someone who's already opted out. Well, I just see an error here. This actually should say opt out, not opt in. Just in my little thing there. There we go. There. So you can't opt them in or opt them out once they're already opted out. Okay. So we're going to get rid of this one, and we will go now to our use case. Now, this is a fairly basic use case here, compared to some of them that we've done in the cooking class, but something that comes up real commonly. So it's a legitimate reason that you might need to use this. My use case is that you have a non-Infusionsoft form on your website for your newsletter signups. Could be any kind of form. Could be just basic HTML form, a Gravity form, a Contact 7 form, whatever. And when that form is submitted, you want to add the contact to the Infusionsoft if it's not already there, and then opt them in, obviously, because they're signing up for your newsletter. Lead pages might be lead pages is integrated, but you get the idea. A non-Infusionsoft form. Okay. Now, because you can't opt in someone who is already opted out, one of the things we have to think about here is if we're talking about a form on your website where someone might sign up for your newsletter, it is possible that someone who is already in your database and at one point in time chose to opt out of your newsletter is now asking to opt back in. And if they do that, it's not going to work, right? Because they've already opted out and the API won't opt them back in. Therefore, one of the things that we're going to have to do here is we need to check the status of each contact as part of this little process. And what I'm going to say is we're going to, in this case, there's a lot of things you could do, but what I'm going to do is just simply here apply a tag if they were already in the database and opted out, which could then be used by Campaign Builder as a goal to either add a task, to manually opt them back in, or send an email in Campaign Builder to someone so that they can manually opt them back in or something. I could have also, I could have actually just used the API to add a task, or I could have also used the API to send an email. But for now, just to make it sort of as flexible as possible, we'll just say we're just going to add a tag. And then that tag can fire off whatever sorts of actions someone might want in Campaign Builder. We won't actually do that part. We'll just assume that part. I think that'll make sense for everybody. Okay. So I have a form that I've created. It's not on my website, but it's this test form. It's just a simple HTML. You can see that the form action posts to CB for cookbook underscore optin.php, which is the name of my script right here. And that the form is very simple. It has first name, last name, and email. And that the holy cow, really? Sorry, you guys. I have been just buzzing along and have not even been looking at your questions. Did I not hit the show screen? I bet you can see it now, can't you? Oh, really? You guys, I'm sorry. There is all these questions or all these comments in here about not being able to see the screen, and I was just not even looking over there. Well, heck. All right, so here's what we are going to do. I don't want to start all over. Let me just think. So I've probably just goobered this recording up for the cookbook. Let me just go back here for a second and show you guys. Have been listening, and I can't believe any of you are even still here. Here's let me just go back. Okay. Let me see how I can I'm going to do this really simply. Okay? So, here is what we're going to do. I am going to run back through this really quickly, okay, so that you can at least see something. But I'm not going to explain it all. I'm just going to so that you saw what the screens look like. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to add a new contact, and this who knows what this contact is. Well, since we're on a theme here, we'll go with Richard Nixon, and we'll make his email trickydick@whitehouse.gov. Young people have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay. And I'm not going to mark him as having permission to send. So now he is got a status of opted out. Well, he's never opted in though. All right. So he's non-marketable. I'm going to copy this and get rid of this for a second. Okay, so now I'm going to go back over here. So I have my new contact we're going to work with. And if I take all of this here and I comment that out and I add a preview screen here like this, you're going to see, no, that's the old one, save. No, save again, save. There we go. Okay, so the first thing we're doing here, as you heard, is we're checking the status. Here's our opt status using the email, which is the only thing you can use as the argument. The status 2 is double opted in, 1 is opted in, and 0 is opted out, or in this case, never opted in, non-marketable. So make this bigger. Okay, that's what that means, 0. Okay, so we check his status. Then what I did is I said, okay, well, let's opt him in. So we'll check him, then we'll opt him in, then we'll check him again and see what that looks like. And so I'm going to hit save, and you can see here what happened was, now opt in 1. If you get a 1 here, that means success, that we opted him in. If it's blank, it means we did not opt him in. As I said before, either because he was already opted in or because he was opted out, wouldn't matter. Either way would give you a blank or fail. And then you check the status again, and this time it will say that he is now opted in, which is a 1 right here. Okay, so this got him opted in. All right, and then the last thing is we are going to opt him out. Okay, so we will comment this piece out, and so here's our opt out. They are identical, opt in and opt out. The arguments are email and a description of why you are opting them in or out, or why you think you have the right to opt them in or out, and then a check status again. And again, if I hit save now, you will see that again, right? They started out as a 1 because we had opted him in. Then we successfully opted him out, which is what this 1 is. And then if we check his status again, he's back to being a 0 because we now opted him out. Now, one of the things I did not show you previously, but I will now, as long as we're on the subject, if I do Richard Nixon, oops, I had him right there. And I check his email status now, which I've now opted him out. You can say view status history. This would also show up on the email status report, right? So notice that these notes here do in fact match up with my notes that I had in my opt-in and opt-out. This person begged for my newsletter. He has no idea what he's missing. So you can see that, the date and time when I opted him in, opted him out, etc. Okay, so that will kind of just confirm what we just did there. Okay, now, okay, back on track. I'm so sorry about that. See, I'm out of practice because it's been a couple of weeks since I did one of these. Okay, now we are going to do the form. So, okay, so this is where I was. Here's my test form. It's going to post to cb opt-in_opt-in, which is my script. And it's got first name, last name, and email, as would be typical of a newsletter opt-in form. And if I preview this like this, now what I'm going to do is, let's just look at the script before I submit this form. So here is our new, or our use case script. Starts out the same as the other one did, only the difference now is instead of hard coding values, I have these are coming in as post. First name, last name, and email are being posted by the form. These names, first name, last name, email, match my form. So whatever these were called on your form, you would need to make sure that you change these to match on whatever was here on your form. See how this is first name, last name, email, and that is the same here. So, and if you, for some reason you had additional fields that you were trying to post and write into Infusionsoft or whatever, then obviously that's kind of outside the scope of this recipe, but you would need to handle those post items as well. Okay, so this is how we're getting the three pieces of information from the form into variables in our script that we can work with. Okay, and so the first thing that's going to happen when we submit our script is the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use an add with dupe check. Now, we did this previously back when in a previous recipe when we did, how to add a contact. I think that might have been our very first recipe we did, because there's nothing more beginner than that, or more fundamental than that, I should really say. So add with dupe check, the nice thing about add with dupe check is you don't have to worry about whether they're in the database or not. If they're in there, it will update them, and if they are not in there, it will add them. That's what add with dupe check means. So here's our add with dupe check call, and what we're adding is an array that has first name, last name, and email, and we're checking on email address. Okay, and again, I've basically and by checking, you can look at the documentation here, like this. So if I go to contact service in the docs, and then I say, there we go, I say add with dupe check. Here you'll see on this ISDK sample, okay, that it looks a little different. It's almost the same, except that here that parameter says email and name, and what that's about is right here. If you read dupe check, right, determines how to consider a duplicate record. Your options are email, email and name and company. I typically just use email because otherwise you get, names, people changed them or whatever. So it's just easier to me to use. The thing I care about is not having duplicate email addresses. So I typically just use email. I typically use email only unless there is some reason for me to use something else. So this is basically copied and pasted right out of here. I've put my variables in here and changed that to email. So, okay. So now you'll notice, because this is actually a script that is a little bit more like something you would do in real life. We're now starting to do some error handling, very, very, very basic error handling. But in this case, we're saying, if the email is not blank, then we want to add with dupe check. If it is, then we're just going to print something and say, why wasn't this, exit the script and print, why wasn't this validated on the form? So just good programming practice to do some sort of error handling. So we're going to add with dupe check, then we're going to opt them in because that's what we want. So this case, we either updated them or we opted them in or added them. Either way, we want to add them to our newsletter. We're going to opt them in. Now, it is possible here that we couldn't opt them in, isn't it? When we check the status, it is possible that they're going to be opted out. And the reason they would be opted out is because they had already existed and they had previously opted out, and therefore this opt-in result would be a fail. It would not have opted them in. And therefore, we know if we tried to opt them in and then we check their status and it's a 0, that they were opted out previously. Someone's going to have to handle that manually. So what we're going to do, as I said, was we're going to add a tag, and then just because we're calling this from externally, we'll write a little log file to so we can see what happened. Okay, so that's what the script does. So let's first we'll use somebody who's new, and then we'll use someone who's existing and already opted out. So you could see what that's going to look like. Okay, so here's our form. So okay, so our new person will be Bill Clinton. Whoops. And he'll be Bill at whitehouse.gov. Now, so when I hit submit, you can just see it echoes out the fact that the form was submitted, and it echoes back a 1. And if you want to look at where that is coming from, this is where that first echo is coming from. And then there is also way down here somewhere. Echo opt-in result 1. Okay, so we know. So I know at this point that actually he was created and opted in. But let's go look at it. Okay, so now we're gonna go over here to Bill, and we're gonna look for Bill C. Nope, get in there. Bill C. Okay, so here's Bill Clinton, and you can see that he is set to marketable, which is what we wanted. If you check his email status, view status history, you can also see that by API, he begged for our newsletter. Okay, so that got him in and added, right, to our database and opted in, which is what we want. Now, let's do a different one, okay? And let me just confirm that Major Dog, back to using my dogs, is opted out. He is. Now, if we look at his email status, view status history, you will notice that I manually opted him out, okay? And I did that on purpose. So, because this time you will see that it will not, when he submits this form to sign up for the newsletter, it will not opt him in. But what it will do is it will apply a tag to kick off a campaign so that someone can opt him in. So let's just see that work. If I go back to our form, and this time I put in Major Dog, Major at kimsnyder.com. Oops. And I say submit. Now what's going to happen, see how there's this 0? The 0 means no, we were not able to opt him in. Now again, normally, they wouldn't see this. I'm only printing this out for our own edification here. The other thing I am doing, if we care to look at it, is I'm printing this to a log file, if you recall. So if I refresh this and find Kim log right here, you can see, right? So here's Bill Clinton. Bill got a new ID of 204. His opt-in status was 1, and there was no tag applied. On the other hand, Major, who already existed, was 196. His opt-in status was 0 because he was already opted out. And so we did successfully apply that tag to him because we needed that tag, right? That's what we said we were going to do. So now if we go, and that tag, by the way, wrong script, that tag was 154, and it's called opt-in exception alert was the tag that I made for this. So let's find Major now and look at him. If we refresh him, you will see that what has happened is he is still opted out, even though we tried to opt him in, right? But he now has a tag called opt-in exception that he didn't have previously. You can see it was applied just now. And if I go to his manage email status, view status history, see, it's not opted in, which we knew, but the tag is there, and then that tag could be used to do something, kick off a task or something. Okay? So that is a how to opt in, opt out, check the opt-in status, some things to be aware of when you're working with opt-in, opt out, and some code that kind of just gives you a typical use case on all of that. So now, so at this point, I will open it up for questions, which is why I did not have you guys, your question thing up and on top. I apologize. That's it for the cookbook. I will take questions on either this opt in, opt out, or anything else that you all would like to ask about, API related or not. I see I lost quite a few people, but I apologize. I just hate that. I probably gave up. Those of you who are left, any questions? Any questions? Happy Mother's Day, everyone, by the way. A couple of our regulars, a couple of people who are here occasionally. No? Okay. Well, very good. I will assume that means that you understood it all, and hopefully you will find it helpful at some point. I am working on getting all of these recipes posted. So hopefully in the near future, those will be available. Also, just to let you know, those of you who are here, there is a webinar. It is a kind of a special version of our mastermind, API mastermind. We usually do it Thursdays at 5 o'clock. It is going to be this Tuesday at, I think it's 5 o'clock. I'm almost positive it's 5 o'clock. And that is, we are going to have Lisa McQueen from Clean Corp. Lisa and Hamish won the Icon Marketer of the Year for this year at the recent InfusionCon, if you were there. And we had made for them a automated contract process that allows them to kick off the sending of a contract out from the campaign builder that is, merged in with all the contact information, and sends it, gets it signed by the whoever, and then sends that person notifications, a copy of the PDF with their signed contract, and also puts a copy of the signed contract in their file box. So that is something that we built for Clean Corp, and they did not get a chance to show that off at InfusionCon. So Lisa and I are going to show it off Tuesday. Whoops. And then we are going to give out the code, all the code for that as well. So that will be the only time or place that you'll have the access to that code. We're going to package it up in a way that hopefully allows you guys to install it yourselves if you are so inclined. So anyway, I'm going to be sending out an email about that here, probably not tonight, probably first thing in the morning or tomorrow afternoon, about how to join that. So keep your eyes out peeled for that, and hopefully you will join Lisa and I on that call, special mastermind on Tuesday rather than the normal Thursday. No, there's a question about, does this go in GitHub? No, the cookbook does not. I do not make this public, the cookbook code, like I do the other stuff. So if you would like it, you need to, if you're here, I'm happy to email it to you, but because this will later be published for sale, we don't just throw it up on GitHub. So you need to, if you need the code, if you want this copy of this, you should need to send me an email, and I'll shoot you a copy of the file. All right. Well, let's see. Yep. You guys send me an email. There's too many of you to find you all. Yep. Good. And then I think that looks like all the questions. So easy enough. You guys have a wonderful rest of your Sunday, and we will all talk soon. Thanks for joining, and thanks for sticking with me through my little technical faux pas. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.